Welcome back to Streamline Entertainment. This is a reaction video to Sonia Poulton talking about George Michael. He was an iconic English songwriter and record producer who became one of the best-selling artists of all time. He rose to global fame as a member of the pop duo Wham before launching a highly successful solo career. He was actually born Georgios Kerikos Pen Iotu. Michael co-founded Wham with Andrew Ridgeley. I probably butchered that, people. I'm not Greek. 1981, the duo achieved massive success with its like Wake Up, Before You Go Go, Freedom and Last Christmas. After the duo split in 1986, Michael launched a solo career that solidified the superstar status. His debut solo album, Faith 1980, was a global phenomenon, selling over 25 million copies. You think all that time ago, 25 million copies was unbelievable. Worldwide, and winning a Grammy Award for Album of the Year. He was known for his distinctive vocals, songwriting prowess, and creative vision. I mean, look, he went to the very top. He passed away peacefully at his home on Christmas Day in 2016 at the age of 53 from natural causes related to heart disease and a fatty liver. He is remembered for his immense music talent, impact on pop culture, and generosity. Obviously, his ex-partner, Fady, who he was with, I think one of the big questions is why he didn't report it straight away. And obviously, this is a reaction video to Sonia Poulton and some questions that some people may know, some people may not, but it is interesting. Let's get straight into this.
Coroner's report and the autopsy came out and they said it was a natural death. How natural is it really to die at the age of 53, right? In other words, when they say it's a natural death, what they mean is there was nothing suspicious about the circumstances which led to his death. But it isn't natural to die at the age of 53, but it might be if the sum total of what he had done to his body had finally mounted up. It's primary school stuff, isn't it? That what we put into our bodies.
Look, we know he wasn't perfect. He took drugs, he liked highs to actually get him through life. Many famous people sometimes have got weaknesses in their life to cope with things. Being famous is stressful enough.
And what we put on our bodies will have an impact on us, for better or for worse. And George was notorious for the various substance abuse that he enjoyed, and he didn't shy away from that either. So what happened on the day George was said to have died? Well, this is where it starts to get really weird. This is where it starts to get weird for me. And it started to get weird for me because I remember reading these accounts at the time, and I was like, that doesn't make sense. Like when your solar plexus just goes, I think I'm rejecting that. Well, that was what happened to me. So the last person to see George alive was his boyfriend. His present boyfriend was a man called Fady Fawaz. This was them obviously in happier times. And it was Fady Fawaz who found George. And lots has been said about Fady Fawaz. He's described as a former celebrity hairdresser and a photographer, and who had apparently been with George for around anything between 5 and 7 years. Quite difficult to tie it down to an exact date. There are varying schools of thought as to who Fady really was to George.
So Fady Fawaz is a Lebanese Australian hairdresser and photographer, but I'd imagined he met George in the pop world. Best known as the former partner of the late British pop superstar George Michael, he discovered Michael's body on Christmas Day in 2016. How iconic on Christmas Day at the singer's home in Goring on Thames, Oxfordshire.
Whether he was a boyfriend, which he claimed to be, or whether he was somebody who was essentially paid to be around George. Certainly after George's death, many of George's close friends and associates described Fady as a leech, as a parasite, as a gold digger. And it was Faddy who found George on Christmas Day. And he said he tried to revive George for an hour before he called the emergency services.
I mean, that's a hell of a long time. We don't know whether he was on drugs as well, because don't forget, Faddy was acting really off key after that. I wouldn't get out the house in Henley.
And obviously, when you hear that, you've been trying to revive somebody for an hour. And I'm going to play you the clip in a minute part of the clip when he calls the emergency services. It goes on 4 minutes. I'm not playing you the whole thing. I've cut out things like the address and the pauses and all that. But I've left in the most salient points that I want you to hear, because I think it's quite insightful about what was going on. Because you have to bear in mind that this phone call was made to emergency services while Faddy is there with his supposedly dead boyfriend. So I think it's insightful. And there's a couple of things here, first of all, and that is, it was said that the last public sighting of George Michael was on Christmas Eve. And it was reported that passers-by in the annual torchlit parade from the church next door to his house saw George watching them from an upstairs window as the procession made its way past the house. Okay, and Christmas Eve was particularly hard for George. It was the birthday of his beloved mother, Leslie, who had died. And it was very sensitive for the whole family.
He lost his sister as well, which was quite bizarre. I mean, seemed like to me they were ever so close, but like I said, it seems like a lot of bad things were happening I wouldn't say bad, but deaths in the family around George as well, and people that were close to him.
But the only account that we have of George, the last hours of George, is from Faddy Forwaz, and what he has to say has been extremely problematic throughout, extremely. And the bottom line is, Faddy in this picture is literally the only person who really knows what happened to George Michael. So I'm going to tell you his version. According to Faddy, he and George argued on Christmas Eve, resulting in a day of non-speaking and both seemingly spending time in their respective rooms in Mill House, or Mill Cottage rather, in Goring. Then Faddy says on Christmas morning, he went to wake up George to find him lying dead in bed. In a statement, he said, "We were supposed to be going to Christmas lunch. I went round there to wake him up and he was just gone, lying peacefully in bed. We don't know what happened yet."
I mean, where did he stay? Did he go to a hotel because they argued? Did he stay in another room? Did he go out and come back? It's bizarre, obviously, his statement.
Everything had been very complicated recently, but George was looking forward to Christmas, and so was I. And Faddy later tweeted, "It's an Xmas I will never forget, finding your partner dead peacefully in bed first thing in the morning. I will never stop missing you." The problem is, this confusion was already being compounded because Mr. Forwaz originally said he spent the evening that he slept in the house, and then he told a newspaper that he'd actually slept in his car overnight on Christmas Eve. And I can't find an account of Faddy actually seeing George throughout Christmas Eve, because by Faddy's own admission, they had an argument and were in separate rooms. And there are newspaper reports that people were coming and going on Christmas Eve, including shopping deliveries, and that George was prepping for Christmas. But whatever the truth, whether Faddy was actually in his room or in his car, which already is problematic, right? Because surely you remember where you spent the night, okay? The official...
I mean, that's really bizarre. Really bizarre. Sounds a bit fishy to me.
...story remains that Faddy awoke on Christmas morning and went upstairs to see George and found him lying in his bed. He said there was nothing out of place. George was lying still. The bed was neat and undisturbed. And interestingly, there was no visible sign of distress, such as vomit or thrown about covers. And apparently, but by all accounts, George appeared to be very peaceful. So what did Faddy do? Well, after spending an hour, apparently repeatedly trying to wake George up. Faddy was said to have called his relatives. He was said to have called David Austin, who was George's long-term childhood friend, collaborator, and I think he'd become George's manager as well. And then Faddy agreed to dial emergency services. The time was now 1:45 in the afternoon, and the contents of that call was leaked. So let us listen to some of it.
Ambulance emergency. Is the patient conscious and breathing?
No, it's George Michael. I think he's dead. He's in bed.
He's dead?
Yes.
Okay, so he's not breathing. Okay. It's the Mill Cottage, is it?
Correct.
Okay. And how old is he?
He's 53.
53. Okay, and where is he at the moment? Can you get him lying on his back?
He's in bed, dead.
He's in bed. Okay, is he cold?
He's cold and he's blue.
He's blue, okay, and is he stiff?
Yes, and he's very stiff.
Okay, and I have to check, do you think he's beyond any help at the moment?
He's dead.
And so you don't think that resuscitation would be effective?
I have to just call an ambulance.
Okay.
Yes. I've been trying to wake him up for the last hour. Is it possible? He's gone. He's blue.
He's gone. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I mean, he seems 100% sure that he's dead. Not much sort of. I know his accent's quite, deep, and his first language is not English, but doesn't seem much sorrow. Do you know what I mean, or panic?
And was it an expected death?
No. I didn't for him to wake up for hours, and he wouldn't wake up. I went to wake him up, and he was gone.
I hope you can understand that. Obviously, it's difficult in parts to fully understand it. And but one of the things that I thought was interesting, well, a number of things, and so did George's relatives, was actually during this call, Faddy had difficulty remembering the address of where they were, the George's date of birth. But when the call handler asked if the death was expected, Mr. Forwell says, no. I've been waiting for him to wake up for hours, and he wouldn't wake up. I went to wake him up and he was gone. He's not there. He is blue and cold. And of course, again, bafflingly, waiting an hour while trying to resuscitate him before placing this call to 999. And Thames Valley Police said that officers were called to the property in Goring-on-Thames shortly before 2 p.m. on Christmas Day. And a spokesman said, sadly, a 53-year-old man was confirmed deceased at the scene. At this stage, the death is being treated as unexplained but not suspicious. After his death, George's publicist said, it is with great sadness that we can confirm our beloved son, brother and friend, George, passed away peacefully at home over the Christmas period. The family would ask that their privacy be respected at this difficult and emotional time. There will be no further comment at this stage. But Faddy's inability to remember whether he had slept in the car or the house and waiting for an hour.
Do you know what I mean? I just think that's a really good point. What if they were both high as a kite for some reason, and he couldn't remember what happened, or he was drunk and decided to sleep in the car and go back in the morning? That's a possibility, but he could have been out of it and didn't want, because don't forget, after it, he was really off key. He wouldn't get out of the house where George's family wanted him out. He was seen on the streets of London acting really, really off key. I'm not too sure what he's doing now, but his behaviour was really, really bizarre after George's death. But like I said, he wasn't a suspect. But like I said, he was the last one with him. I mean, could he have saved George? Or was he expecting expected to be in George's will? Because he seemed to think that he was owed money by George for being with him, which is quite bizarre. And that's a big red flag there.
to call emergency services was very weird for many people, including people in the comments right now. And it was these very weird events and Fadi's changing account of them that led many to view him with suspicion. People wondered how or why he had spent a night in the car, and as I say, next to a freezing river in the depths of winter. And yes, it is possible. It is possible, but of course he had the changing story. It was, he was in a car, he was in the house. Which was it going to be? You know, I remember at the time when there was this changing story, I remember comparing it to what Jerry McCann had said about how they had accessed the apartment that Madeline was in, where they ended up changing their statement because Jerry couldn't seem to remember whether they'd come in through an open side door or through the back door. And it could well be, right, that some people say that these people have suffered such trauma that they can't actually remember. But I would argue that you would be able to remember whether you slept in a car or whether you slept in a
100%. 100%, especially if there's been an argument. And like I said, the way it come across to me was not as caring, as panicky as much, considering that he said he was blue and he wasn't breathing. Wouldn't you call an ambulance? I'd call an ambulance in the first couple of minutes if I knew someone stopped breathing. It's strange, and obviously try to, make them breathe again.
So it's absolutely easy to see why Fadi Fawaz would be of interest and considered someone worthy of questioning. And it should be pointed out that Fadi was questioned by police investigating George's death, and there has been no suggestion of any wrongdoing whatsoever. And Fadi went on to claim that George had died both of AIDS and had taken his own life on Christmas Eve. And I think this in part is where it also gets interesting. On New Year's Day, Fadi's Twitter account claimed that George's death had been as a result of suicide. He said, "The only thing George wanted is to die. He tried numbers of times to kill himself, many times, and finally he managed." And Fadi went on to claim that his Twitter was hacked, but then he has repeatedly claimed that because, as you will see, he ended up tweeting some outrageous, egregious stuff about somebody that he was said to have been involved in an intimate relationship with. But, Fadi's account continued to be conflicting. That was the reality. And, so he claimed that George had not died on Christmas Day, that he died on Christmas Eve. And he said it was a fifth suicide attempt of George's. And
it could well be a possibility. But like I said, he seemed happy a couple of days before when the news snapped him. So why he would do that? Or was he fed up with Fadi, who seemed to be very, very sort of domineering in his life? And you could just tell afterwards, after George died, he was just after money, Fadi.
So you have these series of conflicting accounts from the only person who actually knows what happened in the final hours of George Michael's death. No wonder it's problematic. And what Fadi actually said was, let me tell you, he'd sent a series of emails. They were actually seen by the Sun. And he said, let me tell you, George died on his mother's birthday, which was Christmas Eve. So that might answer a few questions. Not to mention, it took 5 attempts to manage to end his life. I think it's important for the story. Well, I
mean, why would you come out with that at the end of the day? We know, obviously, that George had a problem with drugs and possible some kind of depression as well, which he'd only talk. I mean, they were a very, very private family at the end of the day. But like I said, the run up to his death, I think he was in a newspaper like a week before or something like that. He seemed fine and happy at the end of the day, but maybe it could have been Fadi that was wearing him down. And he thought, I ain't got much to live for. Do you know what I mean?
It would be important for the story if it's true. So is it true? And Fadi had said, I've got other quotes from him. And this is where I mentioned at the start, right, that there were synchronicities throughout that just kind of spooked me a little bit. Well, one of Fadi's very famous quotes was about George. He had tried to kill himself 4 times. Whilst in rehab, he tried to stab himself 25 times. He never told me how he did it when he was taken for 3 days to Marylebone. This was to a rehab clinic. I would say, aren't you glad May 16th didn't happen? And that was referring to one suicide attempt. Well, what was May 16th? What happened on May 16th? Well, you may have remembered this. This was when George apparently fell out of a moving car at 70 miles per hour, May 16, 2013, on the M1 motorway. And I remember hearing it at the time, and I was like, this came after a series of events. I mean, as you will see, as this story starts to kind of like, as I move on with it, you'll see obviously that George had a series of very interesting events, stays in hospital, car crashes, pretty much all the way up to his death. But this one was literally falling out of a moving car. And he was found bloodied and bruised after apparently tumbling from the passenger seat of his Range Rover. Initial reports suggested he had lost his balance while attempting to close a door that he had failed to lock properly. Well, this was poo-pooed by experts, including experts from Range Rover, who said that that's just not going to happen because, I mean, there are all manner of reasons. And there are all manner of kind of technical reasons why it would be extremely hard to fall out of a moving car, and especially like a Range Rover, and there was issues about his seatbelt as one example. But what really this raised up was the possibility that George may have attempted to kill himself by throwing himself from a moving vehicle. And there were a number of eyewitnesses, including one poor woman who described swerving to avoid hitting him as he lay concussed in the road. She said that George was lucky he didn't die. She said she said that George was covered in blood, his clothes torn apart as he lay on the 4-lane stretch of motorway outside St Albans. And he was travelling with 2 friends, and they pulled onto the hard shoulder and ran back across 2 lanes of traffic to help him. And as I say, experts said it would be very, very difficult to fall out of the vehicle, which was traveling at around 70 miles per hour. And this was not a one-off. This was not a one-off. But what was interesting about this and how the motorway fall didn't add up was that we were then told that George was lucky to have survived and got away with superficial injuries. But he then spent 2 weeks in hospital. Who spends 2 weeks in hospital with superficial injuries? Was this, in fact, a suicide attempt that was covered up by his team, and the time that he spent in hospital was an observation period to ensure that he would not attempt to harm himself again? And Fadi Fawaz continued to say about George that he'd wanted to die so badly, and I think life stopped for him.
I mean, you got to ask yourself, did he help him to do it? In a way, at the end of the day, because he badly wanted to go. Some people could be off key about that. Did he know that George just liked the company rather than taking Fawaz seriously? Because, like I said, it seemed like to me Fawaz would move out the house, trash the place, didn't he, and just wanted money.
Him a long time ago, and we're going to cover in a minute why. For many people, George's life appeared to stop at a certain point. But
definitely, I'd say there's a little suspicion about how George died. There's no doubt. I think he had serious mental health, depression problems, anxiety, drug problems, which I think he smiled to the world, but had a lot of basically insecurities inside him, which I think basically, obviously, he didn't have that much family around him. I think Fadi was. I got a just feeling just Fadi was just out for what you get, and that was money. You could really, really see that after that. And maybe, like I said, just maybe, like he may have helped George to die just to get a payout, because it seems like that, because he went absolutely ape when, like I said, he wasn't left anything or expected to be left anything for helping George, to be honest with you. So it is an interesting case. I thought the points that actually Sonia brought up were unbelievable. But like I said, it'll be 10 years Christmas Day since he passed, a brilliant British icon. and that won't be forgotten. I will try and do, I think Sonia did go on to discuss something else, obviously about George basically trying to end his life before. So I'll try and do a second part, but it'll probably be next week now. Thank you, people.